Okay. Hello, people. Guess what? Oleg broke the pipeline and now he's stressed and I have to do the creepy intro. But today is not about that. Today is about Steph, who knows how to do content right. And we don't want to be stressed anymore about that. Help us, Steph. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm
Oh my
Anna.
God, Anna. Amazing intro.
I also couldn't wait. I mean, I couldn't wait to break in and say how amazing is Anna. Please continue. Like,
Thank you.
Yes, go on.
I just couldn't hold myself.
I'm Anna. I'm writing about communities. I'm an engineer and I have 10 billions of hobbies all over on every topic. Next.
Yes, that's true. Okay, I'm Lara. I'm community manager, designer, producer.
A big boss.
Yeah, and all other boring
The main
stuff.
harasser.
Yeah, and being the youngest one here.
Yeah, I'm apparently being the oldest one here. Usually I do creepy intros and do techie things, but now this work being offloaded from me and I'm so happy and amazed about it.
It's for your birthday. So
my barber has shaved out like about 8 years of my age today.
But he's old, no worries.
Yes, like
he's old.
cool.
So Steph, tell about
should
yourself.
I intro?
Yes,
Sure,
like just
yeah.
roll, you know.
Well, I was going to say, Anna did such a good job. I don't need to. I guess I'm Steph. It's awesome to be here. I loved the dancing during the intro. That was so fun.
Yes.
I do a bunch of stuff. I lead a product called Trends at a company called The Hustle, which was recently acquired by HubSpot. So now I guess I work at a big tech company. I also create a bunch of stuff on the side. Like Anna said, I have billions of hobbies or things that I'm interested in. So the main thing that I guess people know me for now is content. So I wrote a book called Doing Content Right. And I, in general, have been working in the content space for a while. I led a publications team at a company called Top Towel, grew my own blog, taught myself to code a couple years ago. So yeah, I always have my hands in something. I never know how to intro myself as well because I feel like there's
That's
like
fine.
a bunch of
That's
different
fine.
things.
That's
But,
good
yeah.
thing, you know, like usually I don't know, I'm producer, so I can talk shit here. So that's the thing, usually when we're inviting men, they're starting like,
in 2008.
40 years ago, I was doing this, and then 30 years ago, I was doing that.
And then I met the dude and he introduced me to that dude.
Yeah, and like he tells his life story from the beginning, and we're like listening for 30 minutes, like, all right.
And thank you for the show. It was an amazing episode.
So this is why.
Yeah, and I actually I was struggling to figure out like how to better represent you in few words, like in the header stuff. So, but like you're presenting yourself mostly as a content creator, right? Like that's like how do you tell what you do to a mom?
Yeah.
Funny because that's a good way to put it because I find there's always things that people tend to know you for, as in like people generally will think of me as like the content person, right? Especially after writing that book. But I also work at The Hustle, which is generally known as like a media business or newsletter business. So I would say that's how people know me. But the way that I think of myself is actually very different. I've been working in marketing and specifically growth for a long time. So that's the way that I think of myself. And that's when I'm talking to my mom or family, I'm like, oh yeah, I work in growth marketing. But people tend to know me for content.
That's okay. I'm also usually telling everybody that I'm a designer, but actually...
Yeah, your boyfriend still thinks she's a designer.
Yeah, so that's fine.
And I mean, we want to talk about something else, but like while we're on this, I'm a content creator. Do you feel this is like devalue? Do you think being a content creator, or framing yourself as a content creator sort of devalues your professional abilities, yourself on a professional market? Just YouTuber, content creator.
There's an element of that. I honestly, for a long time, maybe you could say even avoided it because even though I was absolutely a content creator, when you tell someone like, oh, what are you? Yeah, I'm a blogger or a vlogger or a streamer. There's just like this element to how people interpret it. Versus before that, I was like a product. I was a product manager or I was a growth manager or something. And there was an element of like ego or identity where I was like, no, I'm a product manager. I'm a growth manager. But now I've just leaned into it, especially after the book, where especially now other people are leaning into content and now it's kind of more cool to be a creator. But I do think that identity plays a big role in like how you interpret yourself and what you are like happy to lean into versus what other people lean into on their own.
So you're fine being creator. Yeah, like I feel the same because like that's why I'm not saying Alex is like, yes, I'm a YouTuber and blah blah blah, and I cannot say because I feel a bit awkward for some reason about that.
Well, let's put it this way. Like, I mean, I can be like an old boring dude and tell, look, and I work at Unity, and I work at King, and 13 years ago, and like I'm the DevRel guy, and all that. Like, I was so famous, I was so good, but then, right. But then, like, this young person gets next to me, like, per my face, like, stop doing that, and you know, it sort of I sober up.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an element of like sometimes it's hard to explain certain jobs to like, so it's easy to just be like, I'm a product manager. Most people understand what that is. But if I start going into like, oh yeah, I'm kind of a writer, but I also code and I also like, or even if you start saying like something like I'm an indie maker, people are like, what is that? Right. And maybe someone in
What
tech
is
would be
that?
like, they'll get it. But if I were to tell my parents I'm an indie maker, they'd be like, what are you doing again? My dad, I've told him my job like 10 different times. And every time I go to like a big Christmas gathering, I hear from someone else about like some title my dad says I now have, which I don't. Or like he totally just misunderstands what I do, which is hilarious.
My mom tells I'm a programmer, so at least like to her friends, like, no, stop. He's not a YouTuber. No, he's a programmer.
A lucrative position, I would say.
Yeah.
So Anna, it's time.
Yeah, it's time. So Anna prepared a question for you,
Yes,
which
I
we're
have.
waiting very much. This is the one that I'm also wondering so much. So Anna, go please, go.
So when I heard that you are coming, I have obviously read your book like last year when you just
Thank you.
announced it. Yeah, it was very good one. Like especially there were parts that I resonated with very much. But here is my question. It's not about book. So if
You're
we
like
do
sugarcoat it a bit.
yeah compliment.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we do an exercise of imagination and tomorrow you wake up without social media following, you wake up without blog, without anything, without your friends in tech industry or in content creation industry, how will you start all over again? What will you do?
So you mean specifically to build an audience?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying I love the way you frame that question because I say to a lot of people who ask me, you know, how did you sell so many copies of your book? Or how did you build up this audience? And I say, if I had written that same book, the exact same book 3 years ago, it would have had 2 sales, which would have been like my mom and my dad, right? Like you do need to build up an audience for people to care. And I always say that a lot of people, especially if they come from more of a technical background, they focus so much on creating things, which is awesome. You need to focus on creating really impressive, useful things for people. But then you also need to focus on building up an arm so that people care about you and what you're doing, right? And that's what a lot of people skip out on, or they try to do in like the 2 weeks prior to launching to something, right? Which I just think if you want to get someone to care about something, it has to come across authentically and it has to be over a long period of time. So you build that trust and people kind of like are almost opting into caring about you versus like you know, forcing them to. And so I don't have a perfect equation, but I can tell you what I did back then, which is when I did start one day without any sort of audience. It was around 3 years ago. And I first taught myself to code. You don't need to necessarily do this to build an audience, but I found something that I was interested in and other people were interested in as well. There was so many people every single day trying to learn to code and trying to build products online. So I was living in Bali at the time. I had Peter Levels was one of my friends. I had seen what he did and I was like, okay, I want to do exactly what you're doing. I want to like build passive income through things that I'm personally interested in. So I started doing that. I still haven't even quite made it there, but what I did was I started to just launch stuff that I was interested in. I think I launched like 4 different products, or you could call them products. They're more so just like fun little projects, and joined all of those communities, all of the kind of like indie hackers community, work in progress. There's one called Women Make. I started doing all of those communities because I was genuinely interested and that was like my initial seed of, you know, what I ended up growing now to be something very different. So I always say, if you're trying to build an audience, find like one lane that you are willing to stick with for a while, and that people can, as we talked about even before we started, that people start to get to know you for, right? And so for me early on, a lot of people know me for content, but when I was first building my audience, it was all like indie making, developing, learning how to code. You can even see it on my blog. All of my early articles were about learning how to code, the myths behind that, etc., how other people can do it. And so I started there. After that, I started writing, right? And so as someone who had worked in content for a while, I knew how to get articles to rank for SEO, how to get something trending on Hacker News. So that was like the next stage of building an audience. And during that, I was also building up my Twitter audience. And then after that, I joined The Hustle. So that made it even easier because I could kind of lean into that audience. But over time, I switched from focusing on learning how to code, as in that being my thing, to many other things. Now I write about tech. Now I write about content. That's the one thing that people tend to know me about a lot now. But I guess the key thing here to like summarize is that building an audience overnight almost never works. Of course, there are outliers to that, but it basically, outliers are outliers for a reason. And thinking in like a 2 to 3 year time horizon about what you can talk about, like for that time horizon that you're going to be interested in for that long, is the key. Whereas I think a lot of people are like, they'll try building an audience, they'll try tweeting about something for a couple of weeks and they'll be like, it didn't work. And it's like, well, no one builds up a Twitter following in 2 to 3 weeks. And I would also just say
unless something kicks. So basically, as far as I understood, your formula is you're doing something that you like, and you take audience from somewhere else, from somebody else. Like you go to other community, like, and for example, show yourself, and people from there come to you, or you go to.
If we're talking about like tactics, so initially what I was talking about is just finding something that you are uniquely experienced in that you can talk about, that people can kind of latch on to.
Yeah, but how would you show this to people? Like, for example, I'm very good at something, I'm doing something, but I need, to show it to people. I cannot just upload, video into YouTube and expect that like people for some reason will start watching it.
Yes. So to start, there's a couple of different formulas here. The first one is that at the beginning, what a lot of people I think do wrong is, yes, they go to these scaled platforms and they upload something to YouTube, or they start posting on Twitter, and there is no reason why anyone on those platforms should care about you, right? When you have no following, you've not proven yourself. So at the beginning, you do need, as they say in startups, you need to do things that don't scale. So doing things that don't scale are joining communities, talking to people one-on-one, cold emailing people, getting yourself out there in a way that is, again, not scalable. It's not something you're going to do when you have 50,000 people following you, but joining those communities early on, that's why it's like a one-to-one relationship. And those communities are going to buy into you because they like you at first, before you've proven yourself. After you've done that, that's when I say that you should basically, you have to vet a bunch of different platforms, whether it's Twitter or Twitch or YouTube or Instagram. You need to basically explore those platforms and see where your community is. You should always be thinking, if you're building any sort of community, where are they, not where do I want them to be, right? And start posting there and seeing what resonates. The amazing thing about the platforms that exist today is you get data. Like, I can post 10 different things on Twitter this week, and I can see what actually, what people are engaging with. And then I can say, this is what people like me for, right? This is what people are interested in. And then you double down, obviously, on whatever's working. It's not a scientific approach, of course, but I would say that as you do that, as you're building on these scaled, unowned platforms, then you're also building your own platforms. Those are things like a newsletter, your own community, your own products. But I actually would say building and monetizing your own products, I generally don't encourage people to do until later, because what you want to do is, because soon as you're
at which point I should monetize my product, when it's the right time.
So speaking strictly about content in this case is what I meant by that. And what I'm getting at is, it takes so long. I've done this myself for companies. It takes so long to build up an audience that cares about you. And as soon as you start putting your content behind a paywall, you're immediately restricting your ability for your content to work for you, which is ultimately your most powerful growth tactic. And so as I see people do this all the time, they'll say Substack is a great company, kudos to them for what they built, but they'll go to Substack and they'll say, I really want to, monetize this newsletter for $10 a month. Great. If that works for you and it brings you the income that you wanted, wonderful. But then they'll say, how do I grow this thing? And I'll say, well, it's really hard to grow this thing. You put all your stuff behind a paywall. So, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And what I encourage people to do is to put a lot, just as much value out there for free as possible. Like I said, I didn't monetize my stuff for around 3 years before actually kind of putting things
And
behind
that's what
paywalls.
scares me. And that what scares me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm listening to you and you're saying that you have been working so hard, so freaking hard for 3 years without asking a penny. And I don't know, maybe I'm too corporate, right? Like this creator indie thing, that's my first year. And I still have like a bit corporate dude here, like in the brain, like doing like this corporate thingy. And I just don't understand if I have something valuable in my head that I'm sharing with the people, why don't I ask a penny for it immediately, instantly, so I know what people love and value?
So the way that I like to say it is, so there's no correct answer and there's no correct time to monetize. However, I liken it to bootstrapping versus raising venture capital. And so the same way that bootstrapping or raising venture capital is a personal decision to say, do I want to build a billion-dollar unicorn and have very, a low chance of that succeeding, but if it does, it's wonderful. Or do I want something that's more, gradual, but will never become a billion-dollar business, most likely, right? But I'm funding it myself. Those are very different avenues, and there's no correct answer. The same thing is true with content, where most of the time, if content creators are honest with themselves, they want to build a massive audience. Most people don't want to build a small audience that they can just, live nicely off of, but never will get past that, small hurdle. And so, if that's true, and you want to build a massive audience, you have a couple different paths. If you basically do want to build that massive audience, I think of it as the comparison to be venture capital, where basically what happens when you raise venture capital? You might bring a bunch of money in, you get a bunch of free users, right? Think of something like Uber or Postmates or DoorDash. They bring a bunch of free users at which at some point later they hope to become profitable, right? But they're willing to bet on the model that they've created and the value that they're pushing towards these users that one day will come back to them. The same thing is true with what I think most people would benefit from content. Create a bunch of free content, a bunch of really useful content, a bunch of things that people buy into. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it takes longer than you might expect. But then at some point, you've developed all of this trust where people really buy into you and what you're building, to which case it's so much easier to sell something. It's so much easier to monetize. The flip side is...
Actually, to be honest, I'm a bit concerned about this. And okay, I'm gathering the audience, but I'm not sure if those people are ready to pay me. Ever. Yeah. So I better...
You can always validate along the way. My point is that I don't think that... I mean, again, there's no right or wrong, but I'm saying if you are just looking to build a huge
trying
audience...
to understand other point of view, this is why I'm a bit picky.
And to clarify, I don't think there's anything wrong with someone going and monetizing a $10 Substack and that being their business and them starting that way from the beginning. But my point is that it becomes so much harder to grow, so much harder to grow as soon as you put something behind a paywall. And so if you can continue to grow, and some people do manage to do this, I'm almost expressing this because I've seen so many people who think oh, I can put my stuff behind a paywall and it's going to be fine. And even people who used to have free stuff and then they convert it to paid and then they go, oh my gosh, how do I grow this thing now? And then they've actually reverted. And so I think of, as a marketer, what I really think people should be doing, whether they start free or paid, is building up a large funnel of which the top of the funnel has to be free. You have to bring in some level of awareness.
This makes sense.
And at some point, you need to have a paid product. But I don't think that it's so hard to grow if the only thing you have is a paid product. You need to have some sort of free awareness engine and then a paid product. And generally, I tell people that it is more effective if you build up the free engine first, right? Because that's the easiest thing for someone to latch onto, and the easiest thing for someone like yourself to grow, and then later, creating something paid, which is what I did with the book, for example. And of course, you make good points that you can validate along the way, right? You can always test something, you can always try to pre-sell something and see if people are interested in buying it. But I think the core of what I'm saying is you should never, in my opinion, have only a paid product, especially from a content perspective.
Well, yeah, that makes sense because you cannot promote it. Yeah, that's right. There is supposed to be something for free as a top of a funnel, and then but I think that still not supposed to, but you can make this pay button pretty fast. even to sell for few people.
For the core audience, for the community. So it's like, I mean, growing the follower base, that's, I mean, I'm not arguing, I'm more like thinking aloud.
Yeah, just try to discuss.
Since like this topic is super fun. And I guess the context why we're bringing this up is that like it's sort of a common thing to tell everybody like you have to grow your audience, but isn't the recent trend is like 100 true fans are better than like your whole audience, because these 100 true fans, not 1,000, like it's 100 these days at 2021.
For sure.
Like 100 true fans, like your core community who follow you, who love you, and who like they can give you, I don't know, $1 or $2 like a month, but like they help you live out of the content. They have to spread yourself, your personality, your character.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that. So if you're talking about it from making a living, you don't need 1 million followers. I don't have 1 million followers, right? Like, and I'm doing perfectly fine financially for my creations. But I would also challenge what you said in the sense that if you are developing 100 true fans, 100 true fans don't happen overnight, and they certainly don't happen with one product. Think about any of your the favorite people that you follow online, whether it's on Twitch or Twitter or somewhere else. You've been following them for a long time because of the like trail of content they've given you over a long time, right? So whether it's like just a bunch of different tweets over time that you really resonated with and you're like, this person gets it, or if it's a stream of YouTube videos that you watched and you're just like fell in love with the way this person thinks, like that is the free content that I'm talking about. You cannot, unless you have 100 people that you know personally that are willing to support you, but then even then they're just supporting you out of like, you know, a friendship versus really like buying into what you're building, then you do need to develop a long stream of content over time that people resonate with. And that doesn't happen if you put it behind a paywall, because as soon as something goes behind a paywall, they'll maybe buy into your first product. And if it was really excellent, maybe they'll buy into your second, but you can't develop the same kind of relationship with them that you build over years, right? Of openly content creating and putting things out there that are ungated. So that's where I challenge you, where yes, you can absolutely make a different kind of living today based on the infrastructure, the payments infrastructure that exists today, the platforms that exist today. But if you are going to have 100 true fans, the people who, I can't think of a single creator who has like the true fans that we're talking about that hasn't been creating for several years.
I think this was a very important conversation, at least for me, who is like just starting not just starting, maybe 1 year in the process, because it seems
Anna, 3
like
years.
online.
Don't be humble.
Okay,
3
but
plus,
this
maybe
project
5.
is specifically.
It depends how you count.
Yeah, it depends how you count. So my thing is like everyone, if we follow someone on Twitter, like you, or in general in someone's newsletter, you see that they are already always know the answer that just give value. Like, and when you say just give value on Twitter, it just not saying enough of stuff, and it's covering all that 3 years of work you need to do just to build that relationship, just to build that trust. And I think that is what is missing in the conversations that is happening in creator economy now, that it's, yeah, there are all outliers, as you mentioned, but it's really hard work. Even if you want to like get to that 100 people, you need to get to that 100 people.
And just tied to that, sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to comment, like the reason that sometimes like you might see on Twitter, people will write threads about like, this is how you grow your audience, and it's like all this like step by step. In my opinion, most of that is fluff, because at the end of the day, it's like asking how do you build a friendship, right? Like if you were to ask someone, hey, how do you build a friendship? They wouldn't have a thread to say, this is, oh, well, you check in with them every so often.
Oh, and I saw that. Actually, there is a thread about
I'm
that.
sure people
won't underestimate.
But we all know that ultimately, at the end of the day, the same way that you build a friendship, it's like it's an emotional thing, but it's also like it builds over time, and there is no like scientific approach. Of course, like even in the book I wrote, Doing Content Right, I teach people how they can think about this, and I do give them strategies that hopefully will help them so that they're moving in the right direction. But there is no like formula to this, in the sense that like if you follow X, Y, and Z, it will absolutely work. And that's why, you know, ultimately like giving the advice of just, you know, it takes time and put in the work and provide a shit ton of value for people for a long time and then convert at some other point isn't the advice that most people are looking for. So that's why, like,
no drama.
yeah. I mean, it's the truth though, right? A lot of people are looking for, like, I want to build a content business. And every time someone comes to me, whether they bought my book or they're looking for me to help them do contract work, I tell them, well, are you willing to do this for at least 6 months? That's always the timeline I say that, if you're not going to, especially if you're doing content, you're not going to see significant growth until at least 6 months in. From my perspective, again, there's outliers, but if you're not
Yeah, but in
those
general,
outliers,
yeah.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Like, I got like my internal revenge, not revenge, like my internal confirmation that I don't like these threads. And even if you go to that threads on Twitter, you see the same stuff. Like, follow the niche communities. Like, go this Slack
Go
or
and
go to
spam your
this
shit.
Discord.
Yes, 300 communities to spam to spam your shit all around and shit like that.
Anna, can we make you even happier? I mean, we have discussed with Steph this angle of like audience and community and growth and true fans. But we have been dancing about the money topic for a bit, and Steph is known for also being very open about her income, and that's
money.
Yeah, and but what I suggest we talk about is how investable are creators, since Steph brought up the idea of she compared creators to startups pretty much, and how like bootstrapping versus venture capital. And I think we still have time for this interesting angle, because Anna, you have been quite angry
about
recently.
this also.
I'm not angry anymore. It was like 2 weeks ago. Anyway,
still.
Anyway, so we met with an investor, me and Alec, and the investor basically said that, like, yeah, your business, like, which is my business, is a paid publication about communities. So she said, yeah, you're not a startup. You're just a media company. You're just a news outlet. Yeah, like slapping.
It's just a media company.
Yeah. And she said, if the trolley bus hits you, you will die, and your business will die with it, because you're a one-person company. And basically saying, go away from here. I don't like you.
Like, creators are not investable. Creators are not startups.
Fuck you, no money for you.
Yeah. What's your take? Are creator startups?
It's such an interesting question. So I have a bunch of different thoughts here. So the first thing is that it's important to acknowledge that the economies of scale of creators today are going to be different than the ones in 10 years. Meaning, and I think we're moving in the right direction, where if you think about like what one person could do 10, 20, 30 years ago, it is so different than what one person can do enabled by technology today, right? So even think about, like, separate from the creator economy and content, what, even a decade ago, Instagram was able to build was like this revolutionary, like what you can do with, 9 people, I think it was 9 or 12 people, to create $1 billion business. Well, in 10 years, it's going to be one person who can build $1 billion business. That business may not be in content, but it certainly can be, right? Based on the technology and the scale that we have today. So I disagree with the fact that, like, creators are not investable. I will say that I think there's a lot of hype around the creator economy. And I think that the important aspect that people should keep in mind is that creators are really, really good. This actually relates to our prior conversation, at creating audiences, basically, they're marketers, right? They're able to create environments where people care about something. What I find a lot of creators, and I struggle with this as well, is finding ways to monetize that effectively. Most creators are not good at monetizing, right? And most creators, the reason I would say that often they're, at least today, maybe not good at monetizing, is because there's only a couple avenues to monetize, right? So most people will create a course. That's what I did, right? Courses / books. Some people will create a paid community. That's fine as well. There's nothing wrong with these ways or approaches to monetization, but I think the future of the creator economy is when we expand past that, and people basically understand how to combine what we think of today as the creator economy and the wider economy. So if you think about even people like Jay-Z or Kanye, they are part of the creator economy, but I would say they're at a more elevated version of that, of generating audience, but then they have like alcohol brands, or they have more ways of monetizing what they've already built. And I think that is when something like a classical creator is going to be worth much more than what they are today. And I'll just add on that I think most businesses, because of the way technology is evolving, in that, of course, technology is very, very valuable, but because technology is being democratized, if you think about most businesses is the product, and then again, getting people to care about the product. The ability to build the product is becoming easier than ever. And therefore, the hard part, the way that most businesses are going to have to differentiate is getting people to care about the product, right? And that's when actually marketing becomes even more important. Even though it seems like this fluffy thing that is becoming less important over time, I actually think it becomes more important because the other stuff becomes democratized. And in that case, that's why you see people say things like every company is becoming a marketing company or every company becomes a media company. And that's where I think lines are being blurred. And that's why most people, if you're talking to this investor, says, you're just a media company. Well, a media company on its own, I think, is becoming less powerful. But a media company that is paired with a tech company, a media company paired with an apparel company, a media company paired with something else, is no longer just strictly a media company. It's basically a tech company or an apparel company or whatever. That is what I think, it becomes a lot more powerful. And I think, again, the most powerful part of that is that if you can capture an audience, you have the moat now, because the ability to build the product behind the audience is the part that's being democratized. So I don't know if that made sense, but the reason I'm partially bringing this up is that's what we did, or that's what we were acquired, The Hustle, by HubSpot. That's what they were doing, right? They said, look, we've built this technology product, the CRM. We have built this, but the part that they don't struggle with it, they're also very good at acquisition, but why not acquire the media side, right? It's so much harder to build that, so why not pay for it? And you're going to see, I think, a lot more of that, where people are recognizing the power of attention and that it's hard to generate, and therefore it's worth something. Anything that's hard to generate is worth something.
Anna, you can cut out this moment and show to investors.
No, I have a much better idea.
I can cut out this
Yeah,
for you.
You will cut out this, and then we will anonymously send it to all the possible investors all around. Like, watch this and like listen and repeat.
We were
Watch
trying
and repeat.
to
Like,
explain this to the investor basically, and she was just not getting it. Like, I don't want to like bash her because she obviously has a lot of talents in other and expertise in other industries, I'm sure, but I think for me personally, it hurt hearing that from her. But I think you put it in a very good way, so people will
in
see
very
the
clear
value.
way. So yeah. Like, the investors will understand. We will cut out this moment.
we will, and it also was it was a magic moment. Like, usually we don't like when our guests like talk a lot, so we interrupt them, and here like three of us were like mesmerized, like, yes, please,
Yes,
continue,
yes.
Steph. Yes, please go. And it was so fun. It's such a rare occasion, so I know that's probably
Thanks.
I know probably will like you.
Yes.
That's also a rare occasion. Like, usually we split into antagonist, protagonist, and somebody who mediates. And here I think
we were like, okay, because for example, when Anna was asking her question, the first one, we've been expecting a bit different answer.
Right.
And we were like,
Twitter answer.
Preparing for the fight.
Yeah, like Twitter thread answer, like just post. And we were prepared for this. We were like, okay. And you're like not answering him. I'm like, all
What will we
right.
do now? Like, and Lera tried to.
Yeah. She tried to provoke you. It was very fun, and you were like chill, like yeah, it's good. It's like, so I know you broke the show, but I like it.
Yes, yeah.
I broke the show. Well, no, that's
but
awesome.
in very good way. But in very good way.
Yes, I like it. I like the way it ended up more than what we sort of planned
Expected. So yeah.
Good. I mean, I think we still have time for one more question.
No.
So, no?
I think it's already time to say goodbye. Yeah, thank you very much. That was very interesting. I'm very surprised that
And motivated.
The conversation went not as we expected, but I really like it so much. We're gonna cut out your answers and send it to investors.
And my favorite moment of the show was when like three of us wanted like to instantly like hug you and like,
yes.
It was so cool.
I think everyone, honestly, even people who write those threads feel that way about those threads. They know that they're not actually helping anyone.
Like you like this thread, like.
But I'm still gonna write it. I will like get a lot of
No.
retweets.
I know what are they thinking. They're thinking this will give me so many retweets. You have
Yeah, that's what
idea.
I'm saying there. Oh, I see a cat.
Yeah, my cat is there.
Felix.
He should not be there. I need to yell at him.
Good. Lera, are you fine with the outro that you did?
Yes.
And it's time to say goodbye.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thank
me.
you for
It's been
coming.
fun.
Subverting expectations, let's say, in the best way possible.
Yes.
That's good.
Broke the
Okay.
show and we like it. Cool. Goodbye,
Well, let me
Stefan. See
know if
you.
you need
Bye.
anything.